the last few lectures or last week also, we have been broadly. So last few lectures, we have been exploring multi-electron atoms, energy levels, basically, right? And I've been arguing that, the most dominant contribution comes from the electron-electron interaction and the splitting of the energy levels, etc., based on total spin and total angular momentum values, basically. Okay. And yeah, so I showed in the last class that the corrections to them using first order perturbation correction and variational principle can already take your energy levels very close to the actual values. Okay. And today we will basically continue from there, and we want to explore the antisymmetry of the total wave function of multi-electron systems, something which is related to Slater determinant, etc., and then connect this Slater determinant to the central field approximation, and then do a few problems related to this variational problem that we did, etc. And then based on what we do in today's lecture, we should be able to do electron filling configuration in multi-electron atoms, something along the lines of what you have read for how to construct the periodic table of elements, let's say. So we'll primarily focus on the first two topics today, and then we may continue on the third one in the on Friday's lecture, let's say. Okay, so let's go ahead. So antisymmetry of the many electron wave function, let's say. So let's start from here, basically. Okay, and what is the main idea? So the main idea is that for a two electron system, we constructed the symmetric and antisymmetric part of the spatial and the spin wave functions, etc. Okay. And the idea was that, let's start from single particle wave function and use them to construct multi-particle wave functions, number one. And then we wrote down the product of, single particle wave functions, etc., and found that, in some cases, they can be the multi-particle wave functions in the sense that they have symmetric or antisymmetric properties, etc. Otherwise, I can always take two set of wave functions, etc., and construct a symmetrized or anti-symmetrized product by adding them in a particular form. So for example, for the spatial part, we had this combination 1 by root 2 psi n1 l1 l1 r1 psi n2 l2 m2 r2 plus or minus psi n2 l2 m2 psi n1 l1 m1, basically. Okay, with the indices change, basically. So this is r1, this is r2, and this is r1 and r2, basically. Okay, and the main idea is that roughly, so the labels, the quantum numbers, etc., you should think like labels of the box. Okay, and r1, r2, etc., are labels of the particles, etc., which are indistinguishable. Okay, so if r1 and r2 are indistinguishable particles, etc., then I should be able to change r1 and r2 without any consequence of the to the physical wave function. Okay, now physical wave function is not really a physically measurable quantity, so I can still pick up a phase in the physical wave function, but any physically measurable quantity should have no consequence of interchange of particles, basically. Okay, so that's the main idea. And just for namesake, the symmetrized combination of the spatial part of the wave function was called para, and the anti-symmetrized part, which came with a negative sign here in this equation, was called the ortho wave function. Okay, and then similarly, I argued for the spin channel, basically, I can construct, symmetric or anti-symmetric wave functions, etc. So for a two particle state, for a product of, two spin wave functions, etc., let's say chi plus denotes the S plus eigenvalue. Okay, Sz is equal to plus one eigenvalue, etc. So which in the matrix notation is just 0, 1, let's say. Okay, and chi2 is the same, basically Sz is equal to plus one eigenvalue, but for the second electron. Then I can combine these to generate wave functions which are symmetric. So the product of chi1 and chi2 plus plus product of minus minus chi1 and chi2 minus chi2 minus. So the total angular momentum is plus one in both of these cases, etc. And then I can produce a product where the up spin is So the spin 1 is up and the spin 2 is down, and vice versa. Basically, spin 2 is down and spin 1. So spin 1 is down and spin 2 is up, basically. So a linear combination of these, etc. And these three together are called spin triplets. So they denote the spin symmetric part of the wave function for two electron system. Okay. And we explicitly showed that, these are the eigenfunctions of the total S operator also, etc. Okay. So these are the spin symmetric part. And then for the spin anti-symmetric part, we can, we'll always have the total SZ value as 0, and which implies that the total S has to be 0, etc. And for two spin, there's only one combination which works, yeah, which is this anti-symmetry property, which is 1 by root 2 chi plus chi. So chi1 plus chi2 minus. So chi1 is up, chi2 is down, minus chi1 is down and chi2 is up, basically. Okay, so this is a spin singlet wave function, which we explicitly showed that these are the symmetric and anti-symmetric part of the spin wave functions, etc. Okay. Okay. And then the idea that we have used here, etc., is basically that the single particle wave functions, both spin and the spatial part, etc., are known and easy to calculate. Okay, so we know the solution for single particle problem, and we will use the products of them to construct basically symmetric and anti-symmetric combinations. So that's the idea broadly. Okay, and I'm listing this separately. So I'm listing this, how we constructed, what are the ideas, etc., because we are just going to generalize this to more than two particles. Okay, and we show that this works very well for two electron systems. Yeah.
So we can't see the notes.
Why is it not shared? Okay, so let me just stop sharing and then I'll share again, I guess. Okay. Okay, is my screen visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So yeah, there must have been a glitch somewhere. Okay, fine. Okay. Okay. So basically, I've been trying to argue that, how do symmetric and anti-symmetric combinations of the 2 cross 2 electron system look like in the space part, first equation, and in the spin part, and the second half of this page, etc. And the main idea is that single particle wave functions are, known. Let's use them to construct multi-particle wave functions in terms of symmetrized or anti-symmetrized products, basically. And this idea can be generalized to a multi-electron system, basically. Okay, but before we go, let's take a step back, etc., and let's think, so for the two electron case, this is easy to write, etc., right? But how do I write this in a particular form where it becomes easy to generalize to multi-electron systems? Okay, so what is the better structure? Okay, so just to be specific, let the space part be psi1 and psi2, and the spin part be, chi plus and chi minus, and I will put in brackets, the electron 1, 2, and things like that, basically. Okay, 1 and 2 or plus and minus label the states, basically, and I will start putting electrons there. Okay, and then of course we had this notation where I can combine the space part and the spin part in terms of this u, alpha, and beta to denote the total wave function. And then alpha and beta can take, this 1 and 2 label for the space part, radial eigenvalues, and plus or minus depending on, spin is up, z eigenvalue is up or down, basically. So alpha beta can take these four combinations. Okay, and so this is, simple example here. And then for the case of helium atom problem, etc., we found that, in terms of single particle energy levels, the radial part, the space part, is described by n, l, and m, l, basically, right? And the spin part is described by the ms eigenvalue. So the alpha beta numbers will have this set, basically, n, l, ml, and ms. Okay. Okay. And then here's the claim, basically. So the claim is whatever we wrote down as the symmetrized, anti-symmetrized wave function, etc., I can write this down in a sort of a matrix determinant notation. Okay. So basically the composite wave function, of this generalized coordinates q1 and q2, which I'm using as a shorthand for alpha, beta, etc., is given by 1 by root 2 factorial times this determinant, where u alpha. So alphas form the first column, beta form the second column, q1 forms the first row, and q2 forms the second row. Okay, so roughly particle labels forms the rows and the state labels form the column. So that's what you need to remember, basically. Okay, And if I, so let's just check that this works or not. So 2 factorial, of course, is just 2 because, 2 factorial is 2 into 1. So it is 2. So I could have just written it's 1 by root 2. But it turns out that writing it in this factorial form will help us generalize to multi-electron case. Okay. So we are just going to what is called the Slater determinant, etc. But just as a check, so let me just write this explicitly. So, U alpha, U beta minus U alpha, U beta, Q2, Q1. And the first one is Q1, Q2. Okay. And this is our anti-symmetrized wave function basically. Okay. And then there's a subtle advantage of writing in this matrix notation. That is, suppose I interchange 1 and 2 particles basically, right? Then I'll be interchanging 2 rows. So the particles label the rows, etc. So I'll be interchanging row 2 to row 1 and row 1 to row 2 basically. Okay. And if you remember your matrices correctly, etc., then the determinant of a matrix changes sign if I interchange 2 rows or columns basically. Okay. And that takes care of the anti-symmetry of the wave function. Okay. Okay. So interchange of rows will definitely interchange the sign of the two wave functions, etc. Okay, and we do not worry about interchanging the columns, etc. Because the state labels I've just fixed. I have let's say arrange them in increasing order of energy by some single particle a rule, etc. And I'm just following that. Okay, so the states I do not change. States are just boxes, so I do not care. The boxes I can write the second level first and first level second, etc. That is okay. But which particle I put into these boxes, etc. That is important because my particles are indistinguishable. Okay. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So that's the idea. Okay. And then the main thing is that you must have already seen this earlier, etc. This can be generalized to a multi-electron case easily. Okay. So let's say for a system where there are more than 2 electrons, so we just had alpha, beta. Now let me increase the labels. So alpha, beta, gamma, delta, nu, etc. denote the states basically. Okay. For atomic systems, I can have this set of numbers N, L, Ml, and Ms, single electron wave functions. For hydrogen-like atoms, let's say quantum numbers denote. So one alpha value is this, one beta value is this, and things like that. Okay. And then let me have, let's say, Q1, Q2, Q3, and N particles, etc., for which I want to generate the anti-symmetric wave function. Okay. And then let's say, I know the, for each electron, single particles, I already know what are the, product wave functions of the spin and the space coordinate, etc. Compositely, they are written as U, basically. Okay. Then the claim is that, if I take this psi c, so the multi-particle n particle wave function, and write this as 1 by root n factorial, n being the number of particles, etc. Then, of course, the first column is the state level, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, etc. Since I have n particles, I need n boxes to fill them, etc. So I have n columns. And since I have n particles, first particle goes in row 1, second particle goes in row 2, third particle goes in row 3. So I have n cross n determinant basically. Okay. So U alpha, Q1, U beta. Okay. So the typo here. So U beta of Q1 basically, U gamma of Q1, and so on. I'll go till the nth index basically, U nu of Q1. Okay. And likewise U alpha of Q2, U beta of Q2, and U nu of Q2, and likewise, etc. Okay. So this I'm just generalizing the 2 cross 2 determinant that we wrote, etc. And here also I have the same physics, that suppose I interchange 2 particles, etc. Right? So I suppose I interchange n particle and 1 basically, right? Then that is like interchanging row 1 and row n. So I'll flip them basically. So this line goes here and this line goes here. Okay. And that generates a negative sign in the determinant. So that we already know from properties of the matrices, etc. Okay. And that you can explicitly check that this will give rise to an antisymmetric wave function if I interchange any of these 2 particles basically. So I do any of these 2 interchange, any arbitrary. So Q1, Q2 I interchange, or Q2, Q3 I interchange, Q1, Q3. So any random combination of one interchange of pair of particles, etc., will give rise to a negative sign basically. Okay. And this object is called a Slater determinant. So I'm sure you have encountered this earlier and seen this also. And this slitted determinant serves as a starting point for the calculation of multi-electron system, because I had the single electron energy levels. I use them to construct this generalized product, etc., which is anti-symmetric, or I can also construct a symmetric variant of that I'll see in a few pages below. Okay, and then use this to calculate the eigenfunctions, eigenvalues of whatever matrix I want, basically. So that's the idea. Okay. So any questions till now? So we are introducing a base of symmetrized multi-electron wave functions. Okay, so very, very important. Okay, good. Then let's go. Okay, so a bit of a detour, etc. So now you will immediately start realizing that this later determinant becomes like a very complicated object with increasing number of as n increases, basically, right? So each of this later determinant, for example, is n cross n matrix. So it has in general n squared terms for the wave function, basically, right? And if I use this wave function to calculate any physical property, then I'll have this wave function, its complex conjugate, etc. So I'll have n to the power 4 terms, basically, in the even before doing the integration, I'll have n to the power 4 terms, basically. So if I start talking about systems with 1000 electrons, etc., so I'm having 10 to the power 12 calculations to do, terms to just write down, basically, right? So that's like a lot of pages, and doing calculation will become almost impossible unless I am working on a computer. Okay, so this will become almost intractable problem very quickly. Okay, even for 100 electron system, this becomes intractable very, very quickly. Okay, even computationally. Okay. Okay, but it is still very good. So historically it was very, very useful, and for let's say accurately estimating the energies of the periodic table, etc., it is still very, very useful. So the Slater determinant wave function form. So complicated molecules, we still use the Slater determinant wave function in terms of whatever must be the outermost electrons, etc., to generate a lot of physical insight into what is happening, etc. So a lot of physical chemistry relies on this Slater determinant, etc., to generate properties of complicated molecules and things like that. Okay, but from a physics perspective, etc., if you start from here and try to go to electrons which are 10 to the power 10 or 10 to the power 12, or let's say in 2D systems 10 to the power 15 per centimeter square, or in 3D Avogadro number of electrons, then you will it's a hopeless calculation to do, etc. And this kind of a physics, basically, where I have to generate antisymmetry of the wave function, etc., and solve the problem for multi really, really large number of electron systems, etc., like bulk solids, gave birth to this physics of second quantization, which is the starting point of quantum many-body physics, which is very, very nicely applicable to multi-electron systems beyond atoms, actually. So, for collection of atoms, etc. So that's your whole of second quantization, etc., which you also, many of you must have seen in the course of second course of quantum mechanics. Okay. But that's a detour. So let's just come back to the Slater determinant and its properties. Okay. So I already argued that interchange of particles is, like in the Slater determinant, changing two rows, basically, because remember the rows label the so the particles. So Q1 is row 1, Q2 is row 2, Q3 is row 3, and so on. So if I interchange two particles, that means I am interchanging two rows, basically. Okay. And in any matrix, if I interchange two rows, then the determinant changes sign. Okay, so that's important. Okay. Okay. So then, in some sense, I have having a n electron system. Okay. So in n electron system, I have n coordinates of the electrons, etc. And each coordinate I can put in any of the n boxes, basically. So the first electron coordinate I can put in any of the n boxes. The second electron coordinate I can put in any of the n minus 1 electron boxes. Third one in n minus 2, and so on and so forth, right? So the n electron system has n factorial permutations of the wave functions, basically combinations of the electron coordinates and the boxes or the quantum states in which I can put them in. Okay, and that gives me n prime n factorial permutations of the electronic wave function, which are all included in the determinant, basically. Okay. And then another important point is, if any of the two columns, let's say, or two of the rows are identical, then the determinant vanishes, basically. right? So since the rows label the number of particles, so the particle labels, etc. Let's say the rows are not cannot be identical, but the columns denote the quantum numbers of the atomic states, etc. So they can be identical. Okay, so if any of the two are identical, then the wave function sort of determinant vanishes. Okay, or the wave function vanishes. That is like the statement that uh, of Pauli exclusion principle. Okay, uh, which in its original form, so Pauli gave it specifically for atoms, etc. to start with, that no two electrons in an atom can have the same set of four quantum numbers. Okay, so atoms, hydrogen-like atoms, etc. Particularly, we know that there are four unique quantum numbers to identify single particle states, right? So n, which is the radial part of the wave function, L, the angular momentum part, uh, ml, which is the azimuthal angle part, etc. Phi. So these three come from the three coordinate system, etc. And in addition, there's an additional degree of freedom, this spin of the electron, which is ms quantum number. So n, l, ml, and ms. So four set of quantum numbers. If they are identical for any of the two states, then no two electrons can be in that same state, basically. So this is Pauli's exclusion principle, which we now know works for other systems also, other than the atomic systems and so on. Okay. Okay. So another final point about this later determinant, etc., is this parity symmetry, let's say, which is also called space inversion. Okay. So parity symmetry, number one, or space inversion. So space inversion is a term which is used in condensed matter physics, etc. So if you use Kittel or Barmin, etc., then you will, the same thing, parity symmetry will be written as space inversion. And it is also, you can think of as reflection about origin. Okay. So R goes to minus R. So all three terms are same: parity, space inversion, and reflection around the origin. So basically the symmetry that, I have a vector R, I'm reflecting around the origin. So R going to minus R. Okay. And under parity, let's say R going to minus R, any, hydrogen atom like spin orbital wave function has a parity, which is minus 1 to the power L. Okay. So the parity of the wave function, etc., even or odd, just depends on the number of nodes that the wave function has, etc. And number of nodes depend on the so the number of nodes in the spherical harmonics, let's say. Okay. And the spherical harmonics depend on L eigenvalue. So, you can easily show that this is minus 1 to the power L, basically. Okay. And then slitted determinant, depending on how many number of electrons we have and how many, which are the states, etc., which we are trying to fill in, etc., will have a well-defined parity, because it's a product of, minus 1 to the power L for one electron, two electron, three electron, and all the n states, basically. So minus 1 to the power L1, minus 1 to the power L2 products, so which is effectively like minus 1 to the power sum over Li. I goes from 1 to n, basically. So each of the related determinant states will have a definite parity, and parity is important because using parity I can rule out a lot of optical transitions and things like that. So it becomes easier to think of the system without doing calculation also in terms of parity symmetry. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so all that it says is minus 1 to the power Li will either be a odd number or a even, basically a minus 1 or a plus 1, etc. So the total slated determinant wave function can be either a odd or a even function under a reflection about origin, basically transformation, or under parity, or under inversion, space inversion symmetry. Okay. Okay. So that's all I had about Slater determinant in general. But before we go, so one example of, let's say, the hydrogen atom ground state, just to connect, because we started from space part and spin part being separate, right? And then Slater determinant I wrote down in terms of the combination of both of these, basically spin part and the space part combined in. So Slater determinant I wrote in terms of u, basically, right? So let's just do one example where we explicitly have this use, basically. Okay. So ground state of helium atom, if we consider, basically, so both the electrons are in the 1s state, such that the total angular momentum is capital S. So this is small s, and Sz is basically 1. So this we showed explicitly, etc., that the ground state is so the ground state is the ground state in which electron repulsion is less, so the electrons cannot reside on the same coordinates, etc. And that comes when the space part is antisymmetric and the spin part is the space part is so I'm mixing. So the space part has to be antisymmetric and the spin part has to be symmetric. So if the spin part is symmetric, then it has to be a triplet, basically. Okay. So antisymmetric space part doesn't allow two electrons to be on the same location, etc., because the wave function vanishes otherwise. It decreases the electrostatic repulsion energy. So that's the ground state. Okay. Okay. So for this particular state, let's say I have the spin orbital 1. So U100 NLM and SZ is half, let's say. Okay. So U100 are chi half for the total S, and this half for the S basically. Okay. So this chi half you can write as alpha using our earlier notation. Then other spin orbital momentum 2, I can have U100, and I can have 1 also, basically half also. But I already know from Pauli exclusion principle that if spin 1 is already plus half, then the other one has to be minus half. Otherwise, Pauli exclusion principle gets violated, and my wave function will start collapsing. Okay, so this has to be minus half, etc. So that is U100 radial part plus chi half and minus half, etc. Okay. And remember that this U100 are not the hydrogen atom wave functions, etc. There are some new wave functions which will come out of something like the central field approximation or within some perturbative scheme, etc. So it depends on what approximation I take, basically. Okay. Okay. And yeah, so with that notation, for example, I can write down the psi c as 1 by root 2 factorial, which is just 1 by root 2 times this product. So U100 R1, U100 R1 times alpha 1, beta 1. So the first particle is in, first row, second particle is in second row. The states 100 plus half is the column 1, and the state U100 minus half, which is beta, is the second column, basically. Okay. And then if you just multiply this and write explicitly, so all of them have U100, etc. So this product U100 U100 R1 R2, and other minus sign term also have U100 R2 U100 R1. So I can just take that out, the space part, and then I'm left with 1 by root 2 alpha 1 beta 2 minus alpha 2 beta 1, basically spin part, etc. Right. So you see that this is the space part that we had used to calculate the ground state energy of this 1 by R2 terms, etc., within perturbation or also within variational principle in the last class, etc. So that's the origin of how does this come as a wave function. So the symmetric part of the space wave function, I have 3 combinations, etc. So this, if there's some other orbital, I can have a product of those also, and then for 2 orbitals I can have the anti-symmetrized sum or difference of the 2 products, basically. Okay. And here the spin part comes out to be the spin singlet. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so I think I mixed up a bit when I wrote down this. Okay, but you sort this out. Okay. 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 So yeah, so any question about this later determinant, antisymmetry of the wave function, multi-electron wave functions, etc.? Okay. If not,
So,
then
sir,
yeah. Go
sir,
ahead.
this later determinant gives actually the ground state wave function of the atom.
No. This is just a basis state, basically. I have not said it is a ground state.
Means I always see that this is spin singlet.
This is spin singlet, yes.
So this means ground state.
Yeah. So here we are explicitly constructing the ground state, basically, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But in general, I could have U100, U200, for example, right?
Yes, sir.
And then I need not have a singlet. Meaning, then I need not have the ground state also. Okay. And if it was U100 and U200, then I could have used a alpha 1 here as well, no? Okay.
But that would mean that may not be ground. That will not be.
That may not be ground state. Yeah. So all I'm saying is Slater determinant is a generalized basis basically for multi-electron wave function. Okay. Here we are specifically looking at the ground state. So we started from constructing the ground state basically. Yeah. Okay. And for the ground state, we already knew that the total angular momentum has to be 0 and all that, etc. Okay. So this must be 0 actually. So this is a bad notation. So this S, this was the total, okay. So the total spin basically, sorry. This was the total spin eigenvalue. So this S is 1 basically, but then Sz I can have either, 0, 1 or -1. That is from the triplet parts. Then the spin multiplicity would have become 3. And this is the, singlet part. So for this, the spin multiplicity is just 1. Okay. Yeah. Any other question? Okay. So all of this was about antisymmetric wave functions, etc. Then I can start asking you the question: what about bosons, right? And suppose I want to follow a similar scheme to construct a symmetric wave function, etc. Okay. So fermions, we constructed what is called the determinant. For bosons, what you construct the same thing, the determinant matrix basically, and the mod of that, etc. But the quantity you calculate is the permanent. Okay, and it is exactly the same. It works exactly the same way as the determinant, etc. Except that all the places where I get a minus sign in the determinant, I change to plus signs by hand in calculating a permanent. Okay. And the simplest example I can give you is this 2 cross 2, let's say, system, which is for a 2-particle system. So I had this, determinant wave function, which was psi1 r1 psi2 r2 minus psi2 r1 psi1 r1. And the same thing if I calculate for a boson, so then it should be symmetric, etc. So psi1 r2, psi1 r1 psi2 r2 plus psi2 r1 psi1 r2. Okay, so this is 2 actually. Okay. And then here I had a minus sign, here I should have a plus sign. So I'll just take all the minus sign and force them to be plus sign by hand. Okay. And that defines what is called a permanent. So determinant and permanent actually. Okay. So that's the bosonic multi-particle wave function if you need it in some place. Okay. Or if you
Fermion determinant, there is also psi2 r1 psi1 r2.
Oh, yes. Sorry. So there's a typo. Yeah. So psi2 r1 and psi1 r2. Yeah. So here should be r2. So both of this guy and this guy should be r2. Yeah, this is my own writing, but I cannot argue that I actually wrote 2 here. Okay. So sorry about this. Okay. So this should be r2 and this should also be r2. Okay. 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 So thanks for catching this. Huh? Okay. So any questions till here? Antisymmetric wave function, etc. So I hope you are noticing that how we are going from single particle quantum mechanics to multi-particle quantum mechanics. Single particle quantum mechanics, the electron had one label, the wave function had one r1, etc. Just simple r. Multi-particle wave function, I start having this r1 and r2, etc. And the wave function is in general a complicated object which combines both of these basically terms. Okay. And since we want to come from the single particle picture, we are trying to construct multi-particle wave functions as a product of single particle wave functions. Okay. Or we will try to write the problem such that it becomes a nice problem in terms of variable separable single particles, so that we can have product of single particle effective wave functions as multi-particle wave function. Okay. And the spin complicates things a bit basically, so I have to take care of the spin part and the space part, etc. So even for fermions, the spin part can be symmetric, anti-symmetric, or the space part can be symmetric, as the spin part can also be consecutively symmetric, anti-symmetric, such that their product together needs to be anti-symmetric. Okay. And this is just brought out very nicely in this example of helium atom ground state. Okay, where I constructed the full anti-symmetric wave function, etc. And then if I write down, then it just turns out that the space part is symmetric and the spin part is antisymmetric. So, okay. Okay. And then, so even if you are not working with fermions and bosons, etc., you can use this, etc., to construct what you call the symmetric wave functions and antisymmetric wave functions. So permanents will give you the symmetric part of the wave functions. So you can use, psi1, psi2 as the spatial coordinates only. Then this will become, spatial part of the symmetric part of the spatial wave function. If psi1, psi2 you make into only the spin eigenvalues, so the spin states, let's say, then this will become the symmetric part of the spin wave function, and the determinant will always give you the antisymmetric part of the corresponding things, basically. Okay. And yeah. Okay. So one very nice exercise I can suggest you here is that, you already know how to construct all the spin wave functions of the two particle system. So we explicitly did it in one of our earlier classes, etc., and we derived the singlets and the triplets, etc. Right. Now let's say just go one more. So let's say start with 3 electron system. Okay. And let me also make it easy, saying that, all of them will be in the SZ eigen states, basically. So all of them will be either, SZ is equal to plus half or SZ is equal to minus half, etc. So then just for the spin part, can you construct all the symmetric and the antisymmetric possibilities? Okay. So for 2 particle system, SZ can have plus half or minus half values. I had 4 possibilities. So 3 combined into a singlet and 1 combined into a triplet, basically. So for 3 particles, I should have how many possibilities, right? So the first particle can be plus half or minus half. Second particle can be plus half minus half. Third particle can be plus half minus half. So 2 into 2 into 2, 8 possibilities we should have. And out of this, what are the different angular momentum sectors, let's say. Okay. And then this, different symmetric and antisymmetric combinations you construct, you should be able to show that they are also the eigenvalues of, number 1, the total SZ, and number 2, the total S square operator. So that's the homework for today. And this is a very interesting exercise. This will teach you a lot. Okay. So do this explicitly. Okay. It may also come as an exam problem. I may ensure that I give it in exam. Okay. Because these things we should roughly know very, very carefully. Okay. Okay. So 3 particle spin wave function. What are the different spin sectors? And just to show or make a table such that, this is the S eigenvalue and this is the SZ eigenvalue, etc. Okay. For a 3 particle system. And if you find some difficulty, I think this problem is also partially solved in this Jaco Chen's book in the main text itself, not as a problem. Okay. But refer to it only if you are not able to proceed. Okay. 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 So this was the antisymmetric part of the wave function. Now let's revisit the problem of the potential of multi-electron systems, etc. So that, we figure out that what are the good quantum numbers in terms of which I will construct the symmetric and antisymmetric parts and so on. Okay. So this was the problem that we intended to solve. Forget the nucleus part, hyperfine corrections, the fine structure corrections, radiative corrections, let's forget. So lamp shift, fine structure, hyperfine, all thrown out of the window. Okay. I'm just taking the main part. So the angular momentum, spin is there, etc. And the Coulomb interactions are there, basically. Okay. So in fact, the way it is written, even the spin is not there, etc. But spin we always have to treat together with this, etc. Okay. So the Hamiltonian is, single electron wave functions for, single electron Hamiltonians for each of the ith electrons, basically, as if they are not interacting with anything. So minus h square by 2m dou 2 Ri. Ri should be a vector here, minus Ze square by 4 pi epsilon naught Ri. I summed over 1 to n number of electrons, basically, right? So this is a single particle Hamiltonians, etc. Plus I should have electron-electron interaction. So E square by 4 pi epsilon naught Rij, where Ij is a pair of electrons, etc. And just to avoid double counting, I'll just, start from 1 electron, and for that 1 electron, J can only be, all the values which are, so let's say I start from J, then I can only be, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrons, basically, and things like that, just to avoid double counting of pairs. Okay. And the last term I can also write as half of sum over I J is equal to 1 to n, I not equal to J. basically, because I do not want the same electron interacting with its own field, basically. That becomes a bit spurious. Okay, charge does not interact with its own electric field. No, other charges interact with this guy's electric field. Okay, so that's the idea. And then we already saw in detail in one of the previous classes, etc., that so before we proceed, okay, so in the last class I explicitly showed that if this was just a 2 electron problem, n was 2, then first order perturbation theory works reasonably well unless z is equal to 2 or z is equal to 1. So z is equal to 2 also we found that the error was like 5%, etc., but for z is equal to 1, the h minus ion, the error was like 30%, etc. So the first order perturbation theory didn't work and so on. Okay, but if n becomes like 10 or 12, etc., then this term becomes nc2 roughly. So out of the n electrons, I'll choose any two to interact with each other, etc. Basically, so this term becomes very, very large. Okay, and then it is no longer perturbative. Okay, so that's the main concern. Otherwise, we could have just used the first order perturbation theory or some form of the variational wave function, etc., starting from the first order perturbation theory calculation. Okay, but this is a completely different beast altogether, and I cannot treat this perturbatively. Okay, and that was the motivation behind writing this as a central force problem. Okay, and the main idea was that let me include bulk of the screening coming from this NC2 electron interaction terms, etc. But what I'll do is let me keep only the spherical part of those screening terms, etc., into the primary Hamiltonian, and all the angular dependent parts I will keep as a perturbation. Okay, so I can write this Hamiltonian as HC, which is like the central force or central field Hamiltonian, etc., plus H1, which will depend on all of this complicated angular part, etc. And since bulk of the screening I have already included in the central field Hamiltonian, most likely H1 will be perturbative. So that is the idea. Okay, and from our experience trying to solve the energy levels of all of these complicated atoms, etc., over 50 years, and comparing it with experiments, very careful spectroscopic experiments done on almost all the elements, etc., we know that this works very, very well. Okay, otherwise this is a nice theoretical idea to start with, but it works very nicely with experiments. So established, relatively well established. Okay. Okay, so let me do that. And then the idea is that HC is, just the kinetic energy terms, which is radially symmetric or spherically symmetric, plus V times Ri. And Ri is only the coordinate, not the vector, etc., in some sense. So this VRI becomes a central force potential. Okay, and VRI is just Z. Okay, so here there should be no I basically. So VR in general is minus Z by R. Okay, so E square by 4 pi epsilon not missing here, etc., which accounts for the electron nucleus interactions, plus some SR, which accounts for the electron screening of the electron nucleus interactions. Okay, that was the idea. And then since I added this term, etc., to SC, I need to subtract all the other terms from it, and that forms part of my H1 basically, right? So H1 was basically minus Z square by 4 pi epsilon naught Ri minus VRI actually. So if I include all the correct terms here, etc., then this effectively, so VRI, this term actually cancels out, etc., and the first bracket will only leave me with a minus SR basically. Okay, so I added a SR, I am subtracting a SR plus all the electron interaction terms basically. Okay, and SR already has the radial part of that term, etc. So this becomes minus SR minus E square by 4 pi epsilon naught. Okay, sorry. So this minus is not there. Okay, so this minus is a mistake on my part. So minus SR plus E square by 4 pi epsilon naught Rij. And since SR already includes the radially symmetric part of this last term, etc. So what is left is only the part which explicitly depends on the angular. So the angular deviations from the radially symmetric part of the electron screening terms basically. Okay, so H1 has all the non-spherical part of the electron nucleus and electron interactions in this decomposition, and that is very, very useful because we know that any central force problem I can solve very similar to the hydrogen atom problem, and write down all the eigenvalues, etc. And use those eigenvalues and eigenfunctions to construct many particle wave functions, which can be very good starting point for doing whatever we want: perturbation theory, variational principle, more sophisticated calculations, etc. Okay. So SC should already give, very good estimate of all the energy levels and very good, approximation for the wave functions, etc., which are now a good starting point for taking it beyond. Okay. Okay. And then another most important thing here is that this HC actually, you can show that since this is a central force, kind of an Hamiltonian, it will commute with the total angular momentum operator for all the electrons. So capital L defined as sum over Li, etc., where I denote the ith electron, etc. And HC also commutes with the total spin angular momentum. So S, which is sum over SIs, etc. So HC also commutes with the total spin angular momentum. And that implies that, if the total angular momentum had an eigenvalue in terms of capital L, L plus 1, h bar square, then, this capital L and the capital S, which is, if S square is SS plus 1, etc., then capital L, capital S are good quantum numbers. Okay. And if SC commutes with L, then you can also show that SC commutes with LZ and SC commutes with total SZ. Okay. So SZ or, M capital S and M capital L also become good quantum numbers for denoting the states of the system. Okay. So the total Hamiltonian will have eigenfunctions, which I can now write in general in this particular form. So capital L, capital S, the Z components ML, MS, and one more index gamma, let's say, which is like the N for the single hydrogen atom, single electron problems. Gamma denote the radial part of the wave function, basically, which will come from the central force problem. Okay. And this should look very nice because, what we have done is this is just like two electron system where L, S, ML, and MS were, good quantum numbers, etc. I can work with a multi-electron system also with the same kind of a representation, thanks to this central field approximation idea. Okay. So this is a very, very important concept. I mean, if you just, read about this in this flow, or if I tell you, then this looks like straightforward, etc. But if you really stop for a minute, okay, and think about sequential development of, let's say, quantum mechanics, or how am I thinking about this broad problem, okay, then you will find that this is a very, very significant idea, and this will help you now set up for the next 30 years to solve all the problems related to these electronic systems, multi-electron systems at the atom level. Okay. Okay. And then, okay, so now you know that these are the good quantum numbers for multi-electron systems. So then I can start constructing the slated determinant, etc. Okay. Now we have a problem. Okay. And the problem is the following. Okay. So remember when we constructed the slated determinants, etc., we use the single particle wave functions, right? So U were the functions of N, single particle energy levels, L, which is the single particle angular momentum eigenvalue, ML, which is the single particle as LZ operator eigenvalue, and MS, which is the single particle, etc. Right? And small L, small ML, small MS, and S, which is half, etc., and not explicitly written here. Okay, they are not identical to capital L, capital S, ML, and MS, etc. Okay, so these slated determinant wave functions may not even be the eigenfunctions of the L and S operator. So you have a problem. Okay, and then the idea is, yeah, so the slated determinant, constructed from single particle wave functions may not be the eigenvalues of these operators, etc., which commute with the Hamiltonian SC, and which denote that, in terms of these numbers, I can write down the eigenvalues of the HC Hamiltonian, etc. So the slated determinant cannot be the eigenvalues that I seek or that I want, actually. Okay. And this you should be able to show explicitly, that the slated determinant constructed from the single particle wave function are not the eigenvalues of LZ or L square or S square, okay, operators, though they may be the eigenfunctions of the LZ and the SZ operator. So that's a problem for you to show explicitly. Okay. And then the workaround to this problem is slated determinant still gives me a nice basis, and I can work with linear combination of slated determinants. Linear combination of slated determinants I can use to construct eigenvalues of these operators, etc. Okay. So from slated determinant, we already had, n square, n to the power 4 order terms, etc. And now we will have not more one, but more than one slated determinants, etc. Just to fit into this eigenvalue of the L square and the capital L square operator. Okay. And if you want to do this, then your number of terms is still goes even higher. Okay. So I'll stop here basically, and then use this LM. So this basis set to construct let's say the whole of periodic table in the next class, and then we will do some of these two of these approximations. At least I will outline. So the Hartree-Fock we will not do full calculations. I'll just outline how this calculation is done, and Thomas Fermi approximation we'll try to do in the class, etc. About how to construct this HC. So this V central force potential for the this kind of problems basically. Okay. And then I just wanted to write down explicitly some of the problems for you to try based on what we have done in the previous last two classes or so. So from the 8th chapter, problem number 8.1, problem number 8.2, problem number from chapter 7, 1, 2, 3, let's say, to start with. Okay. And then I had a special problem for just to give you an idea about variational problem, etc. So proof of existence, let's say. Okay, so this is an example of a problem where I have to prove the existence of a bound state, etc. So use the variational principle to show that in a 1D attractive potential will always have a bound state. Okay, so you can choose any attractive potential. As long as it is attractive, it will always have at least one bound state. Okay, so that's the statement, and you can prove this using variational principle, etc. in general. Okay, but just to make it easy for you, specific, so choose the weakest potential, attractive potential that you can found. V is minus V0 delta x. So I am giving you a delta function potential located at x is equal to 0 of amplitude V0 to work with. And then I want to show that it will have a bound state. Okay, so let me give you a choice of a wave function, etc. So I'm looking at a bound state. So all I want is a wave function which is localized around this bound state. Bound states are wave functions which are localized in space, etc. So I'm giving you the simplest wave function I can think of, the e to the power minus alpha x square, right? So the Gaussian decaying Gaussian wave function, etc. as trial wave function. Treat alpha as a variational parameter, etc. Calculate the ground state for this variational problem. Minimize the energy, etc. And if you can show that variational energy is already negative, right, then that's a bound state, because the actual ground state energy will always be below that, right? So that's the idea for this problem. Okay, and then I had one more problem to okay. Okay, so I think okay. Okay, so other than this, I have one more problem for you, let's say, okay, which you can try now, but just give me a minute. I think I mixed up a bit. So I'll just download it again, and yeah. So in combining these notes on my this thing, I must have made an error. So just give me a minute. So I basically wanted to establish you the proof of the variational principle, basically a simple example, one example where we can sort of prove basically, right? Because one of you was asking yesterday that can we prove this or not, etc. Okay. So, okay. So let me just stop sharing that and I'll share a different copy here. Okay. And I'll update these notes to include this. Okay. So here's the problem basically. So, let's say, in generic, I can say that the energy value of a given Hamiltonian, I can write in terms of, psi expectation value of H divided by psi, just to take care of the normalization, etc. Okay. And now let's say this psi differs from the original ground state wave function psi 0. Psi 0 would have given you E0 energy by terms of the order of epsilon. Okay. Then please show that E will differ from the